So let's forget the past. Let's forget all the bad things that we did in the past. So there are better opportunities ahead of us. So let's go, go, go. So go, 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 my dear students. Bakit nga ba go, go, go? That means we should move forward. So let's forget the past. Let's forget all the bad things that we did in the past. So there are better opportunities ahead of us. So let's go, go, go. So to move forward discussion in third grading. So we are now on lesson number 3. So ano nga ba i-discuss natin for lesson number 3? If the last time we discussed about parallelogram and its properties, this time we are going to discuss those quadrilaterals which are under parallelogram. Ano-ano ba yung mga yon? Yung tinatawag nating special parallelograms. So we are going to discuss in lesson number 3 as special parallelograms and its properties. So what are the figures that we are going to encounter here? What are those what we call special parallelograms? So if you are going to recall the diagram of quadrilaterals, you'll find out the what we call special parallelograms. Diba? We define there quadrilateral wherein they are called as parallelograms. More specifically, the rectangle, the rhombus, and the square. So we are going to discuss those figures, which are those quadrilaterals, which are called special parallelograms, together with its properties. So to start with, let us first recall one of your discussion during your grade 8. Because this discussion might help you in order for you to answer some problems which involves quadrilateral or special parallelograms that we are going to discuss today. So we do have here a given line 1 is parallel to line 2 and cut by transversal T. So this is line 1 and line 2. They are parallel to each other, and this is your transversal. So when parallel lines was cut by transversal, there are pairs of angles. If you can still remember. So hopefully natatandaan nyo. We do have, again, number 1, we have corresponding angles. Number 2, we do have alternate interior angles. Alternate interior angles. Ano ba sinasabi natin? Yung corresponding angles, for example, itong angle na to, together with this angle, they are called as corresponding angles. Let's say this angle inside and this angle, they are corresponding angles. The second, alternate interior angles. For example, this angle, they are called alternate interior angles if its pair is this angle. So they are called alternate interior angles. Third, meron din tayong alternate exterior angle. So say, for example, this angle together with this angle. So they are called as alternate exterior angles. Pang-apat, we do have interior angles on the same side of transversal. Interior angles on same side of transversal. So if this is your transversal and we are putting the interior angles, so yun nasa loob yun. So itong angle na to, together with this angle, they are called as interior angles on the same side of transversal. The fifth is we have what we call exterior angles on the same side of transversal, because we do have interior, we do have also exterior. So if this is your transversal, yung mga nasa labas naman yun. If this is your angle, ang kapair niya dapat is this angle for us to say that they are exterior angles on the same side of transversal. What else? Ang-anim is vertical angles. So ano ba yung vertical angles na sinasabi natin? It's just like you are looking in the mirror. Kapag tumayo ka, then look at the mirror, parang ganun yung makikita mo. It's like a reflection of you. So that's vertical angles. Example, itong angle na to, ang ka-vertical niya ay itong angle na to. Ibig sabihin, pag tinupi mo sila, magiging magkaharap sila. Just like this also, this angle and this angle. And seventh, we also have what we call linear pair. We can also form linear pair there. So, pair of angles that forms a line. What's that? There are 8 pairs of angles here that forms a line. For example, this angle together with this angle. So this angle forms a line. So we call that as linear pair. Also with this angle and together with this angle. So ayun yung different pairs of angles na ma-form natin when parallel lines was cut by transversal. Now, let's have a quick review about the measurement of these pairs of angles. So, nahin natin. Let's say, for example, that given angle measures 67 degrees. So, what would be the measure of that angle 1? If you're asked for the measure of that angle 1, so, angle 1 measures 67 degrees also. Why? It's because the relationship of that given angle to that angle 1 is that they are what we call as vertical angles. So according to their measurement, if they are vertical angles, they are congruent in measure. So that's why yung number 1 also measures 67 degrees because they are what we call as vertical angles. Another, same with regards to that given angle, given measure of the angle. With regards to that given measure of angle, what would be the measure of angle 2? So angle 2 measures 67 degrees also. Why? It's because the relationship of the two angles, the given angle with angle 2, is that they are what we call as corresponding angles. So just like vertical angles, if you are going to look at or to find to talk about the measurement of their angles, they are also congruent in measure. So kung ano yung measure ng given angle na 67 degrees, that's also the measure of angle 2. It's because they are corresponding angles. Next, about the measure of angle 3 with regards to the given measure of the angle na 67 degrees. The measure of angle 3 is 113 degrees. So 113 degrees, why? Because the relationship of that given measure of angle 2, angle 3 is that they are called as interior angles on same side of transversal. So if that's the given pairs of angles, so that means if we are going to talk about their measurements, they are supplementary. So meaning to say, when you add the measurement of the two angles, the total measure of the total measure is equal to 180 degrees. So angle 3 measures 113 degrees. Next, about angle 4. What's the measure of angle 4? Angle 4 also measures 113 degrees because its relationship to the given measure of angle is that they are called as linear pair. So angle 4 together with this measure of angle na 67 degrees, they form a line. So that means they're called as linear pair. And if we are going to talk about their measurement, they are also supplementary. That means the total measure when we add the sum of the measures of the two angles is equal to 180 degrees. So since minention natin yung measurement of the angle, measurement ay congruent. Una, corresponding angles. Vertical angles, alternate interior angles, and alternate exterior angles. So yung apat na yon, once you encounter them when parallel lines was cut by transversal, that means their measurements are congruent. When we talk about their measurements, they are congruent. While interior angles on the same side of transversal, exterior angles on the same side of transversal, and linear pair, they are all supplementary. So, ibig sabihin, if you are going to get the sum of the pairs of angles, it will be equal to 180 degrees. So hopefully, na-recall ninyo yung discussion ninyo about parallel lines that was cut by transversal. So, because we might be using this concept here on parallel lines that was cut by transversal in our example about special parallelograms. Now, let's proceed now on our main discussion. So ano ba yung main discussion natin? So, we are here going to enumerate the special parallelograms and together with its properties. So the first special parallelogram is rectangle. So we already define rectangle when we discuss introduction to quadrilateral. We define rectangle as a parallelogram with 4 right angles. So we define it as a parallelogram. So, ibig sabihin, it's under parallelogram, but still it is a quadrilateral. So when you say parallelogram with 4 right angles, the best answer to it is a rectangle because a square also forms right angles. Pero if four right angles ang mentioned in the definition, that means we are only pertaining to a rectangle. So if the given figure is a rectangle, so and we are asked to solve for a problem involving rectangle, so these properties will help us. So there are properties is a rectangle are right angles. So alam na natin yon. That also mentioned on its definition. Number 2, the diagonals of a rectangle are congruent. Diagonals of a rectangle are congruent. Very obvious naman yun that when you draw one diagonal together with the other diagonal of that rectangle, we know that they are congruent in measure. Number 3, consecutive sides are perpendicular. Consecutive sides are perpendicular. Ibig sabihin, pag sinabing perpendicular, it produces 90-degree angle. Very true, it's because rectangle has 4 right angles. So, yung dalawang magkasunod na side, they are perpendicular to form ng 90-degree angle. And number 4, each diagonal divides the rectangle into 2 congruent right triangles. So when you draw a diagonal of a rectangle, so it divides the rectangle into 2 congruent right triangles. Pinag-aralan niyo, di ba yung mga congruent, triangle congruence? So during your grade 8. So you know already why it's called congruent triangles. So based on their corresponding sides. So ayun yung mga properties that will help us when the given figure is a rectangle. So that means we can make use of these properties when we are solving a problem which involves the figure rectangle. Any questions so far? So next is a rhombus. Rhombus defines as a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides. So parang square din siya, di ba? Pero if your definition is just a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides, we are only pertaining to a rhombus. It's like, for example, here, quadrilateral MATH is a rhombus because it has 4 sides which are congruent in measure. So what are the properties that will help us to answer problems which involves the figure rhombus? So these properties will help us when rhombus is given. So number 1, sabi dito, the diagonals of a rhombus are perpendicular. When you draw the diagonals of a rhombus, it forms 90-degree angles, particularly 90-degree angles. So makaka-form yung diagonals of a rhombus ng 90-degree angle. Number 2, each diagonal of a rhombus bisects opposite angles. We may mention again the word bisect. Meaning to say, when we say bisect, it divides it into equal measures. So, when you draw a diagonal of a rhombus, yung angle na hinati niya yun into equal measures. So, ganun din yung other diagonal of it. Then third, each diagonal divides the rhombus into two isosceles triangles. So, yung bawat diagonal daw ng rhombus, dinivide niya yung rhombus into two isosceles triangles. Ano kasi not isosceles triangles? These are triangles with two sides where two sides are congruent in measure. So, yun tinatawag natin two isosceles trapezoids. So, dinidivide ng rhombus, dinidivide yung rhombus ng diagonal niya into two isosceles triangles. So, yun yung mga properties of rhombus that will help us in order for us to answer problems which involves the figure tinatawag nating rhombus. Next is a square. So a square is a parallelogram with 4 right angles and 4 congruent sides. So we made mention it before that when we combine the definition of rectangle and a rhombus, then we will come up with a definition of a square, which is a parallelogram with 4 right angles and 4 congruent sides. Kapag ganun yung definition natin, very specific, so that means we are pertaining to a square. So what are the properties of square that we can use when the given figure in the problem is a square? So, ito yung mga properties na yon. So, dalawa na lang yung properties na idadagdag natin. It's because yung mga properties na minention natin doon sa mga nauna, which is the rhombus and rectangle, we can also make use of that when the given is a square. So, ano pa yung mga additional properties for square? Number 1, the diagonals of a square are congruent and perpendicular. Di ba natutunan din yun? Properties ng rhombus, diagonals are perpendicular. So that's also the same, that diagonals of a square are perpendicular and they are also congruent. Yun naman yung diagonals of a rectangle, di ba? So diagonals of a square are congruent and perpendicular. Number 2, each diagonal of a square bisects opposite angles. Each diagonal of a square bisects opposite angles. So just like one property of rhombus, so each diagonal of a square daw bisects opposite angles. So hinahati niya rin yung angle na yun into equal measures. So yun yung mga karagdagang properties natin that we can use when the given figure is a square. So now, what are we going to do? So let's apply those properties through examples. Let's find out first kung ano yung mga given figures natin. So, let's have example number 1. So example number 1 here, so quadrilateral MNOP is a billboard in the shape of a rectangle. So the given figure is a rectangle. If MO is equal to 6x plus 14, nasa yung MO, ito yun. One of the diagonal of that rectangle measures 6x plus 14 and PN is equal to 9x plus 5. PN is the other diagonal. So find X, then find NR. So we are going to find two things here. The value of the variable X. At the same time, we're going to find out the measure of the segment NR. Nasa yung NR, ito yun, NR. Ano the measure of this segment? Paano natin gagawin yun? So let's have this solution. So, ang given natin, MO is equal to 6x plus 14 and PN is equal to 9x plus 5. So what we are going to find out is the value of the variable X. Then we are also going to find out for the segment NR. So what are we going to do? So Using this given, MO are diagonals of a rectangle. So going back on the properties of rectangle, we made mention there that diagonals of a rectangle are congruent. So that certain property will help us in order for us to find out for the value of x. By knowing that the diagonals of a rectangle are congruent, since these two measures are the measures of the diagonals of a rectangle, so we can make use of this property for us to find for the value of the variable x. That means we can do what we can do is to equate both measures because they are according to the property they are congruent. So to solve for x or to find x, we are going to equate both measures. That would be 9x plus 5 is equal to 6x plus 14. Then isolating that given equation, move 6x to the left side while 5 to the right side will come up with 9x minus 6x is equal to 14 minus 5. The 6x will become minus 6x while 5 will become minus 5. Then um, um, combine similar terms. So 9x minus 6x, that would be 3x. Then 14 minus 5 is equal to 9. Then divide both sides of the equation by 9 to come up with the value of x, which is equal to 3. So the value of x now is equal to 3. So now, the next to find is the NR. So the given is the diagonals of that rectangle. Then we find out for the value of x, which is equal to 3. So NR is part of the diagonal PN. That's part of the diagonal PN. So that means we can find out now the measure of diagonal PN. So in order for us to find NR, since Pn is equal to 9x plus 5, ito yun, Pn is equal to 9x plus 5, and since we know the value of x which is equal to 3, we can find out for the measure first of Pn. So by substituting 3 on the part of x, so we'll come up with 9x plus 5, so that would be 9 times 3 plus 5. 9 times 3 is 27 plus 5, that would be equal to 32. Pn is 32. Pn is 32. So this diagonal MO that bisects the diagonal PN. So ibig sabihin, diagonal MO and PN bisects each other. So ibig sabihin, pag sinabing bisects each other, so inati niya yon, yung diagonal na yon, inati ng diagonal na to, yung diagonal na to into equal measures. So whatever the measure of this segment, that's also the measure of this segment. So kung ano yung measure ng buo na yon, you just have to divide it by 2 for you to find out for the measure of segment NR. So therefore, segment NR is equal to 16. So that's how we answer example number 1. Did you get example number 1? So, dalawang pinukuha natin. We do have one example in example number 1, but we are going to find there 3. So, una, we have to find x. Then before we find out for the measure of segment NR, we have to find out first the measure of PN. And then from that, we can find out for the measure of NR. Any question in example number 1? If none, let's proceed to another example. Let's have example number 2. So number 2, use Rhombus QRST and the given information to find the value of each variable. So letter A, find y if the measure of angle is equal to y squared minus 31. Find m when the measure of angle PQS is if measure of angle RST is 56 degrees, to be specific. Use Rhombus QRST to find the measure of angle QTS if the measure of angle 2 is equal to 57. So find the solution to it. Yun. So that's what we are going to find out there. So the given is a quadrilateral QRST, which is a rhombus. So that means gagamitin natin yung mga properties na alam natin about the rhombus. So let's answer first letter A. Sabi ito, find y Find y if the measure of angle 3, if this is angle 3, is equal to y squared minus 31. So the measure of angle 3 is equal to y squared minus 31. So one property ng rhombus na mention natin para masagot natin yung value of y is that the diagonals of a rhombus are perpendicular. So ibig sabihin, when you draw the diagonals of a rhombus, it forms 90-degree angle. If this is angle 3, and kung measure niya ay y squared minus 31, so ibig sabihin, ganun din yung measure na to. So alam natin yung measure ng other angles there is equal to 90 degrees because they are perpendicular. So it produces 90-degree angle. And angle 3 together with this angle, they are vertical angles. So we can make use of 90 degrees for us to solve for the value of y. How? So to solve for y or to find y, we have to equate that y squared minus 31, since measure of angle or angle 3 is also the same as the measure of this angle, and this angle, we know that its measure is equal to 90 degrees. So we'll come up with y squared minus 31 is equal to 90. Then isolate the given equation by moving 31 to the right side of the equation. So we'll come up with 90 plus 31. And 90 plus 31 is equal to 121. So since y squared pa yun, so we have to remove the square there. That is by getting the square root of both sides of the equation, so that we'll come up with the value of y, which is equal to 11. So ang value of y that we are looking for in the problem is equal to 11. So 11 times 11 yon, that would be 121 minus 31, that would be equal to 90 degrees. So it proves now that the diagonals of a rhombus are perpendicular because measure of angle 3 is equal to 90 degrees. So apat na 90 degrees yung mapuform natin dyan when we draw the diagonals of a rhombus. That answers letter A. Now let's answer letter B. Letter B, sabi to find the measure of angle TQS, as in TQS. TQS. Ang hinanap natin angle is this angle. Ito ha. TQS, that's TQS. If the measure of angle RST daw, RST, yung buong angle na to, measures 56 degrees. So, what is the measure of angle TQS? Another property of rhombus mentioned that each diagonal of a rhombus bisects opposite angles. So, itong diagonal ng rhombus na to, ibig sabihin natin niya yung angle na to into equal measures. Into equal measures. So, whatever the measure of this angle, yung kalahati nun, yun yung measure of the of the angle that we are looking for. So, paano gagawin doon? So, to find the measure of angle PQS, since the measure of angle RST is equal to 56, all you have to do is just simply divide it by 2, then you'll come up with a measure of angle TQS as 28 degrees. Did you get that? Because according to the property, each diagonal of a rhombus bisects opposite angles. So kung yung buo ay 56 degrees, kung 56 degrees to, angle Q is also 56 degrees. Eh what we are looking for is angle TQS, yung kalahati lang ng 56 degrees. So that would be 28 degrees. Did you get letter B? So let's move on. So letter C this time. Use rhombus QRST to find measure of angle QTS. As in QTS. QTS. Ito naman. Yung angle na to. If the measure of angle 2 is 57 degrees, angle 2 daw, this angle measures 57 degrees. Same way with what we did on letter B. With the use of the same property na each diagonal of a rhombus bisects opposite angles. So isang diagonal na to, hinati niya yung angle na to into two angles which are congruent in measure. Kung ang measure ng angle na to ay 57 degrees, Ibig sabihin, yung angle 1 also measures 57 degrees. And what we are looking for is the measure of angle QTS, yung buong angle na yon. So therefore, to find for the measure of angle QTS, so yung 57 na yon, na measure na angle 2, all you have to do is to multiply it by 2. So we'll come up with 57 times 2, which is equal to 114 degrees. Ibig sabihin, angle QTS measures 114 degrees. So that's how we answer example number 2. Any questions? So if not, let's proceed to the next. Let's have example number 3. In example number 3, the given is quadrilateral ABCD is a rectangle. So find x and y. So what are we going to do? Again, the given here is a rectangle. And what we're going to do is to find for the value of x and y with the given measurement this time for the angles of that given rectangle, and also given given yung diagonal pero wala namang given measure for its diagonal, only for the angles. So let's find for x and y. So let's have this. Then given natin finding x and y. So una, to find x. So to find x, ito yung measure natin. Alam natin that a rectangle, yung rectangle, meron siyang 4 right angles. Meron siyang 4 right angles. So itong angle na to, dito nagdo tayo ng diagonal dito, still, these two angles, they are what we call, nating angles natin, they are what we call as complementary angles. When we say complementary angles, when we get the sum of the two angles, it will be equal to 90 degrees. So we know that a rectangle has 4 right angles, has 4 90-degree angles. So itong dalawang angles na to, pag in-add down natin yan, will come up with, it will be equal to 90 degrees. So by knowing that, we can solve for the value of x. These two measure of angles, then equate it into 90 degrees just for us to find x. So that's what we are going to do. So that would be 9x plus 20 plus 4x plus 5 is equal to 90. Then I combine similar terms there. 9x plus 4x is equal to 13x, and 20 plus 5 is equal to 25 is equal to 90. Then move 25 to the right side of the equation. We'll come up with 90 minus 25. Then 90 minus 25 is equal to 65. Then to solve for x, divide both sides of the equation by 13. We'll come up with the value of x, which is equal to 5. So the value of x there is equal to 5. So isa na lang kailangan natin. We have to find for the value of y. So with this diagonal, given yung measure na to, tsaka given din yung measure na to, we still don't know yet kung ano yung exact measure of these two angles. So we are here going to find for the value of y. So paano gagawin natin? Remember yung ginawa natin sa una, yung we recall parallel lines that was cut by transversal. Pwede natin yung gamitin. So let's say, for example, ito yung parallel lines natin. In order for us to find y, ito yung parallel lines natin. Then, let's say ito yung transversal. So, parallel lines that was cut by transversal. So if we're going to look at this angle together with this angle, ang tawag natin doon ay alternate interior angles. And if we are going to find out, or if we are going to talk about the measurements of the angles, what we call alternate interior angles, they are congruent in measure. So by knowing that, we can solve for the value of y. That is by simply equating the two measures there. So we come up with 4y minus 27, ito yun, is equal to 2y minus y. 2y minus 1. Then solve for y by moving 2y to the left and negative 27 to the right. We'll come up with 4y minus 2y is equal to 27 minus 1. Then simplify, come up with 2y is equal to 26. Solve for y, divide both sides by 2. So that will come up with the value of y, which is equal to 13. So the value of x is 5, while the value of y is equal to 13. So that's how we answer example number 3. Did you get the first 3 examples? So hopefully, may natutunan kayo sa araw na ito. So sana magtuloy-tuloy na matuto kayo sa bawat lessons na ituturo natin about quadrilaterals. So kung wala kayong tanong, that would be all for today. Goodbye, class!